there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is End Time Newsman, Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Friday, April 24, 2015. I'm out of the office today for a one-day trip to visit a radio station for sale. If we determine the station's assets are worth the price, and if you, the True News audience, shows support by giving us the finances to buy the station, we will sign a purchase agreement. Isaiah 60 is in motion in 2015. Isaiah's ancient prophecy is being revealed before our eyes. He saw this day thousands of years ago. He said, darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the people. Well, it's here. Gross darkness is indeed covering the people. But here's the awesome news that Isaiah prophesied. He said that when the earth is enveloped in gross darkness, the Lord shall arise upon you and me, and his glory shall be seen upon us. And it gets even better. The Gentiles, meaning the unsaved, shall come to the light of God upon you and me, and the kings, meaning important leaders of the world, will be attracted to the brightness of our rising. Now, this ministry is transitioning into the next phase of God's assignment. He's giving us a second wind, a fresh wind. I've warned for 16 years that this darkness is coming to the world. Well, now it's here. And now the Lord is switching gears in this ministry. He wants us to stop focusing so much attention on commenting and analyzing the darkness and instead start turning on the lights. And I just can't sit here behind this microphone for another 16 years talking only about the darkness. I've got to do something positive, and I've got to light candlesticks. And that's why we are going out now to begin purchasing radio stations. We're going to turn their transmitter towers into candlesticks, and we will light up towns and cities with the good news of Jesus Christ. And I hope you get as excited as I am about this project and will jump in here with us and help finance this acquisition of radio stations. Now, for today's program, I'm going to broadcast remarks made at the United Nations last Friday, April 17, by a delegation of Christian leaders who traveled to New York City to demand that world leaders stop the slaughter of Christians in the Middle East and Africa. My son Jeremy was one of the speakers. He was invited to unveil his short film on the subject of Christian persecution. It is titled Sing a Little Louder. The film is based on a true story about a church in Germany that was next to a railroad track. When a train transporting Jews to the Nazi gas chamber stopped in back of the church parishioners could hear the Jews wailing and begging for help. Disturbed and troubled by the wailing, the pastor led his congregation in singing songs loud enough to drown out the voices coming from the railroad boxcars. My son spoke for a few minutes prior to introducing the film. We'll start today's program with Jeremy, followed immediately by Pastor Jonathan Kahn, and then General Jerry Boykin, Brigitte Gabriel, and Bishop Harold Ray. Here's my son, Jeremy Wiles, speaking at the UN, followed immediately by Jonathan Kahn, author of The Harbinger.
God forgive all of us who call ourselves Christians, yet have done nothing to intervene. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador, thank you for having me here today. It's an honor to be here as a voice for those who have no voice. It's hard to imagine that if we were in Nazi Germany during World War II, that we'd sit idly by and watch those atrocities happen. Not us, right? Not possible. But here we are today. While the world had to decide if the dress was white and gold or blue and black, ISIS militants forced 4 Iraqi Christian children to decide if they would convert to Islam or face death by beheading. The children chose to follow Jesus. The world chose to sing a little louder. As 21 Egyptian Christians were calling for Jesus during their execution, millions in the West were calling in to vote for their next favorite American Idol. America chose to sing a little louder. You see, our greatest enemy are not Islamic terrorists. Our greatest enemy is apathy. It's choosing to sing a little louder. The truth is, we've all sung a little louder at one time. I'm not here to condemn. I'm here to encourage you to raise your voice, continue to raise your voices for those who have no voice. The train has arrived on our soil. We can sing as loud as we want to, but we hear their cries. We hear their screams. United Nations, President Barack Obama, you must do more than sympathize. You must take action. And I encourage you to show the Sing a Little Louder film at your church and support organizations like the Iraqi Christian Relief Council, who are providing life-saving humanitarian support to Iraqi Christians. And you can learn more at singloudermovie.com or IraqiChristianRelief.org. Thank you.
It is April 2015. 70 years ago, this month, this spring, the concentration camps of the Third Reich were liberated. In their liberation, the Allies forced the nearby townsfolk to walk through the camps to face the depths of the horror that Nazism had led to. But for most of those who lived in those towns by the camps, and for that matter throughout Germany, it wasn't unexpected. It was well known that Jews were being hunted down and taken into cattle cars to concentration camps where horror and likely death awaited them. They knew it, but did nothing to stop it. They themselves weren't in danger. Why should they have risked their comfort, their safety, and their well-being for those who were? But when they walked through those camps in the spring of 1945, they were forced not only to confront the evil of Hitler and the evil of Nazism, but the evil of their own. Because in the end, it was their guilt that was the critical and deciding factor. Without their silent complicity, without the sin of omission and self-interest, the mass murder of 6 million Jewish men, women, and children could never have taken place. In 1964, in the city in which this gathering has convened, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was approaching her apartment door when she was attacked by a man wielding a knife. The young woman was brutalized over the course of approximately 1/2 hour. At least 12 people heard her screams or saw parts of the attack during those 30 minutes, but the majority did nothing to help her. Some weren't sure what the screams outside their closed windows were, but they never bothered to find out. It was cold outside, and they were comfortable in their warmth of the apartment. One neighbor who actually saw the attack pondered whether he should even bother to ask another neighbor to call the police. His explanation was, "I didn't want to get involved." As a result of the bystanders of this city, the life of Kitty Genovese was violently snuffed out outside her apartment door. And now, as we meet in the city of that crime, another crime is taking place outside our closed windows. 70 years after the bystanders of Nazi Germany walked through the death camps of the Holocaust, another Holocaust is underway. Again, it involves a satanic hatred, violence, sadistic cruelty. Again, it involves an innocent people marked for destruction, the followers of Jesus, known as Christians throughout the world, who are taught when struck to turn the other cheek, when cursed to bless, and when persecuted to forgive those who oppress them. It is these who constitute by far the most persecuted religious group on earth. They are oppressed, they're afflicted, they're hunted down, they are killed, men, women, and children, the sacrificial lambs of the modern world. We meet today in the world's most revered gathering place of nations, and as kings and leaders and ambassadors and delegates convene here to discuss world issues. Within the border of over 60 of those nations, Christians are being persecuted by their own governments or by those in whose midst they live, from North Korea to Iran, Afghanistan, Syria, Nigeria, Iraq, Pakistan, Vietnam, Indonesia, and many more. In North Korea, Christians are imprisoned, sent to labor camps, tortured, and killed for the crime of owning a Bible. In Nigeria, entire Christian village populations have been massacred. In India, 70,000 Christians have been forced to flee their homes. In Syria, 80,000 Christians have been, quote, cleansed from their homes. In Indonesia, Muslims have put 10,000 Christians to death. And now, after almost 2,000 years, some of the most ancient Christian communities, from the Copts of Egypt to the Nestorians and Assyrian believers in Syria, to the Chaldean and Assyrian believers of Iraq, are in danger of extermination. As the evil of ISIS and its allies sweep across the Middle East, an ancient civilization is being annihilated. Its people are perishing, crucified, decapitated, and buried alive in their ancestral soil. Not long ago, the vicar of Baghdad recounted how ISIS ordered 4 Christian children to renounce Jesus and follow Muhammad. No, they said, we love Yeshua. He has always been with us. Those were the last words the children ever spoke on this earth as ISIS beheaded them. We hear the accounts of the Christians of the first century led into Roman arenas to be torn apart by wild beasts. We ponder how savage and barbaric those days were. We wonder, what would we have done had we been there? If we had lived in those days and could have saved the lives of the innocent, would we have saved them? The truth is, we do live in those days. Those days are now. More Christians have been persecuted, brutalized, and killed in the modern age than any other. Every year, tens of thousands of Christians are dehumanized, tortured, killed. Over 100 million Christians live under the darkness of persecution. It is the modern age which holds the most savage and barbaric of days. And what are we doing as the Christians are being led away to be devoured? This very body, the United Nations, adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which declares that everyone has the right to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. In the World Summit Outcome document of September 2005, paragraph 139, the United Nations declared that the international community has the responsibility to protect populations from genocide, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. So where are all the resolutions? Where are all the troops? Where are all the actions taken to protect the most persecuted people on earth? And where is the universal outcry? It is a strange and immoral silence, the same strange and immoral silence that allowed 6 million Jews to be delivered to their deaths. We must not repeat the mistake of the last century. Evil never stays put. The same darkness that destroyed 6 million Jewish lives would end up destroying over 60 million lives throughout the world. The evil that first warred against the Jewish people was a harbinger of what would overcome the earth. In the days when coal miners died of black lung disease, an answer was found in the caged canary. The canary was brought deep into the mines. If it grew sick and died, it would be the sign and the alarm that the air inside the mine was toxic. What happened to the caged canary was a harbinger of danger. The persecuted Christian is the caged canary of the modern world. The first target of evil, the sign and the alarm of a toxic evil in the world and a growing danger. If we don't deal with that evil, when it targets others on distant shores, we'll surely deal with it when it targets us on our own shore. No civilization can call itself moral if it fails to defend its most defenseless against that which seeks to devour them. No nation can call itself good if it sits back and does nothing when the effects of evil murders the innocent. And no people can call themselves Christian if they watch passively on the sidelines as those who share the name of Messiah are oppressed and killed for their faith. If our faith consists of how comfortable and prosperous God can make us, as we deafen our ears to the cries of those who are neither comfortable or prosperous, our brothers and sisters imprisoned and tortured for their faith, how can we bear the name Christian? On the day of judgment, we'll be asked, why did you do nothing to save them? And what will the answer be? It's written in the book of Hebrews, remember those who are in chains as in chains with them. So as we sit on our couches in front of our television sets, in our air-conditioned homes, are we remembering our brothers and sisters who sit on stone floors of prison camps as they suffer for their faith? They would say to us now, do not forget us. Do not forget our suffering. Remember us. Remember us as our enemies come to take our lives. Remember us. Remember us. Do not forget that we once lived and we gave our lives for our faith and for Messiah. We cannot forget them. We must remember them and we must help them. What would you do if in your neighborhood a band of criminals take over a house next door to you and they're holding your neighbors hostage? What if every day they oppressed them, humiliated them, tortured them? What if every night you could hear through your windows their cries, their screams, and you did nothing? You didn't try to save them. You didn't tell your other neighbors and gather them to help. You didn't even bother to call the police. In the end, how would you be judged? There's only one answer. You would be judged as guilty and evil. And what if they didn't live next door but down the block? Or what if they lived a town away or a nation away or oceans away? Would it make any difference? Does geography in any way alter the charge of morality? It does not. So if men and women and children across the world are being held captive, beaten, tortured, and put in danger of death, and we know about it, and we hear their distant screams but choose to do nothing, then how will we in the end be judged? We will be judged likewise guilty. It's written on the day of judgment we'll either be upheld or condemned by the good or bad we did to God, to the Messiah. And when we ask him, when was it that we did good to you? Or when was it that we sinned against you? He will answer, when you did it to the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. So if we refuse to get involved and help those who are the least of his brothers, what are we doing? We are refusing to help the Messiah. If we turn a deaf ear to their cries, we are turning a deaf ear to the cries of Messiah. And on that day, he will say to us, when my village burned down in Nigeria, why did you do nothing to help me? When I was in prison inside a labor camp in North Korea, why did you forget me? When ISIS came to kill my family, why did you not help us? And when I was tortured, when I was beheaded, when I was buried alive, when I was crucified, why did you ignore my cries for your help? Why did you let me perish? He will say, now depart from me, I never knew you. When that day comes, let it not be said of us that we heard the cries of God and did nothing to help him. In the time it takes us to hold this session, more people will be brutalized and killed. If it was your family about to be destroyed, if it was your life about to be taken, if it was your little child about to be beheaded, and others could help but chose not to, what would you think? Then let us do the only right and moral thing, as is written in the scriptures, deliver those who are being delivered to death. Let us not go down in the annals of history and in the judgment of God as the bystanders who saw the evil but did nothing to stop it, who heard the screams of the Kitty Genoveses of this world but chose to let them die outside our doors, who watched the cattle cars deliver the innocent to their deaths but chose to stay silent. Let us not be guilty of another Holocaust. Open up your windows, hear the cries, open up your doors, open up your heart, your life, and whatever you have to do to save them, save them. Messiah is screaming. Messiah is being buried alive. Messiah is being beheaded. Messiah is being crucified again. Save him. Save the Messiah. For God's sake, do the right thing. Deliver those who are being delivered to death. Amen. God bless you.
You're listening to True News, the End Time Newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
As a special thank you gift of support to our faithful listeners for the month of April, True News is making available a new shipment of updated portable world band radios. These efficient, easy to use and easy to carry shortwave radios make the perfect gift to introduce a friend to international broadcasting, or even as a backup to what you're already using. Never miss another broadcast of True News on shortwave again. These radios include a tunable AM antenna, a 15-foot long-range wire antenna, self-tuning capabilities, and memory for over 500 preset stations and frequencies. These radios are battery operated with the new enhanced ability to recharge via USB from your laptop or personal computer. Many listeners have written telling us how much they enjoy having their very own personal communications backup, and the improved features of this new model make this radio a must-have. This thank you gift is available now with your gift of $129 to the Ministry of True News. Simply go to TRUNEWS.com, click the support button, and make your gift. The mailing address for your check or money order for $129 is True News, P.O. Box 690069, Vero Beach, Florida 32969. Thank you for listening to True News, and thank you for your support.
This is Max McLean. When evil triumphs, where can the righteous turn? Listen to the Bible from Psalm 7. O righteous God, who searches minds and hearts, bring an end to the violence of the wicked and make the righteous secure. My shield is God Most High, who saves the upright in heart. God is a righteous judge, a God who expresses his wrath every day. He who is pregnant with evil and conceives trouble gives birth to disillusionment. The trouble he causes recoils on himself. His violence comes down on his own head. I will give thanks to the Lord because of his righteousness, and will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. From Psalm 7, listen to the Bible. It's great for the soul.
Be able to hear the Word of God today and every day. Hear more at radiobible.org. That's radiobible.org.
We are broadcasting some of the statements made by Christian leaders last Friday at the United Nations demanding world action to stop the massacre of Christians by ISIS and Boko Haram. The next speaker is retired U.S. General Jerry Boykin.
Thank you very much, distinguished guest. Excellency, thank you so much for your support in making this a possibility here. And thanks to all of you for being here. You know, in 36 plus years of military service, I've seen combat or conflict on 4 different continents. I've actually served and fought along beside people of many races and many cultures and many religions, but I never once questioned whether the cause that I was fighting and serving for was a worthy cause or a just cause. It always was, or I wouldn't have been there. I'm absolutely appalled that neither the international community nor the church in America has seen fit to make this plight of persecuted Christians a transcendent cause for the church. What are we willing, as Christians, what are we willing to fight for? What are we willing to serve for? What are we willing to risk our lives for? And ultimately, what are we willing to die for if it's not for fellow Christians? Think about it. We've talked about it today. This is so serious. You want to know what it's like to live every day of your life knowing that somebody is trying to kill you because you're a Christian? Ask the next speaker. One of the most courageous people in this room today is Brigitte Gabriel. You have to know her story. You have to know her story to understand that when she speaks to you, she's lived it. It's not theory. It's not something on YouTube. It's real. She's lived it. Where every day of her life, there were people trying to destroy her village. because they were Christians. Where is that transcendent cause in the church in America today and in the global church that says, I will fight for my brothers and sisters of the same Christian faith? Where is that transcendent cause? In December of 1995, the U.S. military entered the crisis in the Balkans after 2 years of horrible conflict that left many dead and much destruction. The United States had just brokered an agreement between the various warring factions at an Air Force base outside of Dayton, Ohio, known as the Dayton Accord. This peace treaty between various ethnic and religious groups separated the belligerents and established what was called zones of separation that were to be monitored and patrolled by the international armed forces. The group that had been under the greatest threat during this conflict were the Bosniaks. In fact, it was the slaughter of 8,000 of these Muslims, mostly men and boys, by ethnic Serbs, that actually brought about the United States entry into the conflict. As the world saw the carnage from the events there that occurred in July of 1993, led by a general named Ratko Mladic, a Serbian special operations unit known as the Scorpions, slaughtered these non-combatants in a city called Srebrenica, which had been declared a safe zone by the United Nations. It was being guarded by UN forces at the time, and the result was international outrage, which ultimately prompted the U.S. entry into the conflict. I was deployed to the Balkans after the Dayton Accords had been signed, and I was there to run a task force that was responsible for capturing war criminals that from the Balkans conflict. And over a period of the next 3 years, the U.S. and a coalition of 4 European nations pursued war criminals throughout the Balkans. And we were very successful. We had a great deal of success in bringing these war criminals to justice in The Hague before an international tribunal. Take the case of one of the first war criminals we captured, which was a man named Goran Jelicic, who was called the Serb Adolf, who very proudly told the whole world and bragged about the fact that he had broken bottles and mutilated the genitals of Muslim men, and who also made a great issue of the fact that he had taken multiple Muslims and held them over the Drina River and fired a bullet into the back of their head and let their blood go into the Drina River, and he was so proud of it. But we brought him to justice because of what he had done to the Muslims in Europe at the time. These Muslims had been brutalized. U.S. and coalition forces frequently risked the lives of their soldiers in order to bring these war criminals to justice because of what they had done to Muslims. There were many sacrifices that were made and many risks that were taken. Furthermore, the combined forces of the participating nations protected those Muslims. The Muslims were able to return to their routines and to live in relative safety as nations went to great lengths to provide a secure environment and to apprehend those who had committed atrocities against them in the past. Today there are innumerable atrocities, and you've talked about many of them being committed against Christians in many areas around the world. Northern Iraq, Egypt, Pakistan, Nigeria, Syria, and a laundry list of other places are scenes of the persecution, the murder, the absolute brutality of Christians. The whole world has seen the images of the beheadings, of the crucifixions, of the savage abuse of Christians in these Muslim majority countries. Yet there appears to be no outrage, as there was after the events of 1993 in Srebrenica. Why? Why is there no outrage? Why isn't the international community outraged over what's happening? It's no secret. You can't deny it like we did in World War II. It's no secret. If you can go on YouTube, you can see what's happening. But there's no outrage. There was outrage when it was 8,000 Muslims. But Christians don't seem to matter. And the question then, is why? Take the case of the oldest Christian town in continuous operation in the world, Mayalula, where the inhabitants still speak the ancient Aramaic language. You know, that city has been wiped out. All 5,000 of its inhabitants are no longer there. Nuns and priests have been taken captive and brutalized. The children of that village, many of them, have been forced to go up and take refuge in the caves up in the mountains near the city there. But have you heard about it? And the media hasn't told you about it. And the reason is because they're Christians. There's a double standard here. And it's hard for me to understand. Again, where is the outrage in the international community, like the outrage from the attacks on Muslims in 1993? Do Christians not have the same human rights as Muslims, or for that matter, any other religion? How can the nations of the world not find these reprehensible acts of barbarism unacceptable? A global outrage over this is essential. It must occur. There must be an outrage. And it will immediately raise the awareness throughout the world, and we won't be able to continue to deny it here at home. This is a serious situation. The international community must take a stand and treat countries who practice the abuse of Christians as pariahs and despicable agents of evil. And let me ask this question. When a man named Mohammed Morsi is the president of Egypt, and he proclaims very proudly that he's the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, why would my country give them money and tanks and airplanes while they're killing Christians? No single nation can win this battle. It's going to take a combined effort. But we have to provide humanitarian aid. We have to raise the awareness. And we have to be prepared when necessary to deploy military personnel to fight. To fight against the evil. I don't know whether my 8 minutes is up or not, and I'm going to wrap this up by simply saying this. If I make 8 minutes, I'll be the only one here today that has. I just leave you with this. Psalms 94, verse 16 says, "Who will rise up against this evil for me? Who will take a stand against these evildoers?" You know what? I work for the Family Research Council. After Miriam Ibrahim was released, and the gentleman who brought her to an event that we had is here. I just met with him here at lunch. But Tony Perkins got us all together as his staff, and he said, the battle of the future. Make sure you understand, all of you, the battle of the future is religious liberty. And we're going to stand. The Bible says, who will take a stand That's talking to us, believers. That's talking to us. That's not talking to the non-believers. That's talking to us. Who will take a stand? Well, I know we're going to stand. I'm going to stand. Tony's going to stand. I know we're going to stand. Brigitte, the next speaker is going to stand. And I know Rick Scarborough is going to stand. And I know Steve Strange is going to stand. And Mario is going to stand. They're going to stand. That's what they're doing. Pastor Tom is going to stand. Because they believe the Word of God, and they know that if we won't stand, nobody else will. May God bless you.
Our next speaker is the very outspoken Brigitte Gabriel, founder of Act for America. This is her remarks made last Friday at the United Nations.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, His Excellency Dr. Caleb Otto, Ambassador of Palau to the United Nations. Special thanks for you, for your moral clarity and your courage to stand up and sponsor this event. And special thanks to you, Ugoji, for your leadership and your vision, because without your vision and your work together, this would not have taken place today. Thank you. I come before you here today as a survivor of Islamic terrorism. I was 10 years old when Islamists blew up my home, burying me under the rubble wounded. My only crime was that I was a Christian. At 10 years old, I learned the meaning of the word infidel. I had a crash course in survival, living in a dark, cold bomb shelter, drinking stale water, and having grass and dandelions for food. At the age of 13, I dressed in my burial clothes, waiting to be slaughtered. And by the age of 20, I had buried most of my friends killed by Muslims. When I was growing up, I knew that only 3 kinds of people existed in the world: killers, victims, and bystanders. The lesson I learned gave me a fierce determination to fight evil and become a passionate leader against apathy and indifference. Today, throughout the world, more Christians are persecuted for their religion than any other religious or ethnic group. Approximately 200 million Christians in 60 countries are oppressed, abused, murdered solely because they are Christians. But it is in the Muslim world where the genocide has begun. 14 of the world's 15 most repressive countries for Christians are Muslim countries: Somalia, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Sudan, Iran, Pakistan, Eritrea, Nigeria, Maldives, Saudi Arabia, Libya, Yemen, and Uzbekistan. 36 of the worst 50 are Muslim countries, including Qatar, Egypt, the Palestinian Authority territories, Jordan, Algeria, Tunisia, Malaysia, Turkey, and Indonesia. In many of these countries, churches are bombed or burned while worshippers are inside. Christians are kidnapped, brutalized, raped, sold into sex slavery, mutilated, shot, beheaded, or burned alive. These are not isolated occurrences. I read a story about a mother searching for her kidnapped son. ISIS fighters gave her some meat to eat and water to drink. When she asked about her son, they answered laughing, "You've just eaten him." I could cite hundreds of examples, each more stomach-churning than the one before. But I'll provide one example, horrific but also inspiring. In Iraq, 4 Christian children, all of them under 15, were abducted by ISIS and given a choice: conversion to Islam or decapitation. The children replied, "No, we love Yeshua," the Arabic name for Jesus. We have always followed Yeshua. The choice was put to them again, and the children again chose Jesus. All four were immediately beheaded. I don't cite this example just for its shock value. I cite it to illustrate a mindset. It is not just a mindset of murder. It is a mindset of extermination, especially in parts of Syria and Iraq. Christian communities that predate the arrival of Islam by centuries are being eradicated. Radical Muslims, whether Sunni or Shiite, are not only killing or driving out Christians, they are systematically erasing every trace of Christian presence. That's genocide. Christians slaughtered by evil feel abandoned by humanity, forsaken by the world's conscience, and rendered dead by the apathy of the United Nations. Almost exactly 100 years ago, on April 24th, 1915, the first genocide of the 20th century began. On that date, the Islamic Turks commenced their campaign of deportation, murder, and starvation against Christian Armenians. Next week, as we observe that solemn anniversary, we should remember the repeated failure of the world community to act against genocide, even in the face of overwhelming evidence, and contemplate what can we do to stop genocide occurring under our watch. The world needs to be awakened to the fact that this is not just a matter of persecution of Christians. It is not an issue of right and left, of conservative or liberal, nor is it an American, French, British, Danish, Canadian, or Australian issue. It is one that encompasses all of us, including moderate Muslims. Radical Islamists seek to subjugate everyone who does not adhere to their version of religion. Just because we are not at war with radical Islam does not mean that radical Islam is not at war with us. Pretending that war does not exist only ensures our defeat. The consequences of that defeat will be catastrophic for the civilized world. The United Nations Security Council is, as usual, impotent. And while the Human Rights Council ceaselessly foams at the mouth about perceived Israeli violations of Palestinians' rights, it doesn't seem to notice documented massacres of Christians by Muslims all over the world. It's ironic that Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has an increasing Christian population. Since 1948, the Christian population of Israel has increased 400%. But outside of Israel, Christians are disappearing. At the beginning of the 20th century, Christians represented 20% of the Middle East population. In 2015, they are only approximately 4%. It is time to call evil by its name. Islamic jihadist killing in the name of their religion. It's time to throw political correctness in the garbage where it belongs. It's time to silence the apologists for evil, including members of the United Nations. Today, history and faith meet at a single time, in a single place, at the United Nations, to shape a turning point in a world standing on the cliff of the abyss of intolerance, barbarism, and a new age of darkness. Today, the world is witnessing the mobilization of a barbaric, hateful army, more deadly than the Nazis. Even the Nazis did not feed children to their mothers. The world stood by in 1948, allowing the genocide of millions in concentration camps. Are we going to allow genocide under our watch? Is the United Nations going to have the blood of millions on its hands in the 21st century? Indifference is the death of conscience. Indifference is the enabler of evil. It is the weapon by which millions die, slow, painful death of being forgotten and forsaken by the world, as if they are exiled from human memory. In denying their right to live, we betray our own existence. Tolerating evil is a crime. Appeasing murderers doesn't buy protection. It earns disrespect and loathing in the enemy's eyes. Yet apathy is the weapon with which the West is committing suicide. Political correctness forms the shackles around our ankles with which Islamists are leading us to our demise. I used to lay sleeping as a teenager in the 70s on my bomb shelter floor, praying to survive another day while waiting for the world to act. It never even occurred to me in my fondest dreams that I might have the chance to be standing here at the United Nations in 2015, asking the world today to act against evil. Several months ago, a close friend of mine made a remarkable comment. She said, if we choose to look the other way or choose the path of acquiescence, our grandchildren will demand to know why we didn't take action, and they will have every right to. Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing genocide, and we are compelled by simple human decency to act. It requires us to stand up and resist, as nations if we can, as individuals if we must. I, as the leader of ActForAmerica.org, the largest national security organization in America, with chapters in 11 countries around the world, am committed to whatever possible to stand up against evil. Join us. There must be no delay, no hesitation, and no compromise with our purpose to defeat Islamic radicalism. We cannot, we must not stand on the sidelines allowing genocide in our lifetime. Thanks to all the people who are here today taking a stand at the United Nations, especially Act for America members and guests who came from all over America, Canada, and even Australia to make a statement. Not in my lifetime, not during my watch, not as long as I have a voice. I will not be silent. I will stand up and demand action. Together, we call on every member nation represented in the United Nations to take action. Our enemy understands only strength. I say, let's give it to them. Thank you. May God bless you. May we make a difference in our lifetime. Thank you.
We're broadcasting excerpts from a United Nations event last Friday in which Christian leaders demanded world leaders to do something to stop the slaughter of Christians. Our final speaker today is Bishop Harold C. Ray, pastor of the Redemptive Life Fellowship in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, to all of the esteemed colleagues that are here and to this august body that has joined in this great opportunity to stand together not only as the body of Christ, but as people united for the cause of Christ around the globe. I'm honored to stand today to humbly yet passionately join my voice to the ever-increasing resounding pleas of people of goodwill throughout the nations of the world who are supplicating for imminent and effective intervention on behalf of our Christian brothers and sisters and religious minorities who are being subjected to unspeakable atrocities and unprecedented persecution in the Middle East and around the globe. Madam Ugoji, let me take a moment to, first of all, heartily commend you for your leadership in bringing us together and your outstanding work. You have consistently and fervently advocated on behalf of women, youth, and children in conflict zones around the world, and your work is somewhat unequaled in its consistent focus upon the multidimensional implications of critical areas of engagement, such as that to which we've all come to collectively speak today. Mr. President, members of the General Assembly, just as the civil rights and equal justice under the law was America's preeminent challenge in the 1950s and the 1960s, so too today, throughout the nations of the world, the rising threat and bold savagery of terror from faceless enemies perpetrating senseless acts is the challenge from which we cannot shrink, we must not retreat, and the defeat of which we shall not fail. In his famous letter from the Birmingham jail, the late Dr. Martin Luther King eloquently and passionately penned, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Surely today, those of us who have come to this historic place at this kairotic moment recognize that the growing crisis of human and religious persecution of our Christian brothers and sisters in the Middle East now threatens a viral expansion which, if left unfettered, will inevitably impact religious minorities the world over, even as its pandemic growth threatens the very fabric of life as we have known it in America. The prophet Micah long ago admonished, "He hath shown thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God." In light of Micah's admonition and instruction, today, my friends, our interests are not only mutual, they are mandated. We who enjoy the privilege of religious freedom and relative peace must cry aloud and put our hands to the plow to build the necessary coalitions of synchronistic endeavor to immediately ameliorate and ultimately eliminate religious repression and religious persecution wherever it exists. We note and embrace the recent words of the Holy Father, Pope Francis, who admonished in his letter to Christians in the Middle East, "We must not resign ourselves to conflicts as if changes were not possible." As Dante has aptly noted, the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain neutral in times of great moral crisis. To the contrary, the growing crisis with which our world is faced mandates a commonality of interest and a covenant of unity, cross-culturally, cross-racially, and multinationally. And to that end, I salute, embrace, and appeal for demonstrative interfaith leadership of coalitions focused upon justice, peace, and religious liberty, illuminating the cause of the afflicted around the world. As founder and CEO of the National Center of Faith-Based Initiative and its more than 5,000 affiliates, and as a member of the African American Joint College of Bishops, I extend my hand in pledge and commitment to work together with my interfaith brothers and sisters and people of goodwill wherever they might be, who regardless of faith and belief, seek reconciliation, peace, and justice for all, recognizing, as did John Wesley, that we must now look upon all the world as our parish. Indeed, it was Socrates himself who said, "I am not Athenian or a Greek, but a citizen of the world." I firmly believe our times demand the engagement, and I shall work for the engagement and the embrace of the Black church in America as an essential and fervent voice of passion in the relentless pursuit of justice around the globe, with specific strategic focus upon the tragic persecution of our Christian brothers and sisters and other religious minorities the world over. The Black church in America has been and continues to be an undeniable resource in arresting injustice, subduing intolerance, and championing the cause of those upon whom vulgar assaults of racism, repression, oppression, and abuse are often perpetrated without abandon. As prominent and as pivotal as the role of the Black church has been, it is also undeniable that many of the gains of the civil rights era and the slow march toward justice were expedited by the demonstrable and inextricable covenant that exists between Jews, blacks, and even Muslims of good faith and good people of diverse faiths who marched and even died together in the unrelenting pursuit of a society that is bereft of bigotry and hatred, and regardless of the face of its expression or the origin of its dogma. Today, faced with the atrocities as have been enumerated repetitively in our hearing, most recently even in Kenya and other hotspots around the globe, we should be reminded of the words of the old Negro spiritual. We must walk together, children, don't you get weary. Talk together, children, don't you get weary. Don't you get weary, don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. As we strategically, prayerfully, and fervently confront this existentialist threat, the course of which now meanders seamlessly beyond borders, let us reprise the very anthem of the civil rights movement itself. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. I would change knowing the power of God as I do. I would change that last stanza from saying someday to saying right now. Why? Because the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. They are through God to the pulling down of strongholds. It is not by power nor by might, but by God's Spirit that we take on this challenge. And we rise in the dunamis power of God. We rise in the dunamis power of God to do as the prophet was instructed and instructed us, to uproot, to pull down, to destroy anything that threatens the name of God anywhere in the earth. It is now our apostolic charge and our prophetic course to go where God's light is seen dim, where his voice is heard small, where his power is not known. And accordingly, my friends, today means that this is not a mission to be accepted. It is a mandate that must be achieved. Today, as we are gathered together in this cavernous chambers, on the grounds of this historic institution, let us be reminded of the words of the late Robert F. Kennedy, who said, "Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. And in the total of all of those acts will be written the history of this generation." Accordingly, I join in the dedicated agenda of this day and voices that have raised their voice together to develop and mention strategies, to call upon the United Nations General Assembly and the United Nations Human Rights Council to enact resolutions on the protection of Christians and other religious minorities in the Middle East and around the globe. I call for the church to stand united in consistent and repetitive days of repentance and prayer and intercession, which will change the face of this crisis. And I call upon the President of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama, and his Secretary of State, the Honorable John Kerry, and asked for them to designate not only the State Department, but their ambassador to the United Nations to take the lead, as America is proud to do, in leading this charge in the United Nations. As we shall take leave from this place, let us remember the words of the poet Aeschylus, who observed, "In our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." As we seek to effect change in a world that yields most painfully to change, may we seek and may we embrace the wisdom of God for his will in our world, in our times. And may we also, as urged the Greeks many years ago, seek to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. God bless you.
Well, I hope this special broadcast from the United Nations has stirred your soul to pray on behalf of our Christian brethren in the Middle East and Africa who are under attack by Islam, and to demand that world leaders stop the violence and the bloodshed. If the Muslims are not stopped, their swords will eventually come here too. This is a global Islamic uprising. Satan has launched a D-Day invasion against the body of Christ. His forces are coming at us from many directions. But don't forget that our Heavenly Father is also the commander of heaven's armies, and I believe he is preparing to launch a counter-offensive. Will you be part of it? Get involved in the fight for the souls of lost humanity. Do something to shine your light in the darkness. Refuse to be silent. Let your light shine.